Hey, everybody, I'm Jason Mefford, and I'm here with Brad Miller. And today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic. And I think Brad might have a little show and tell for us, or at least a story to kind of get us into what we're going to talk about today, because it
Mhm.
was at some point this last week, right? Brad, fill us in on the
Yeah.
story, and then we can start digging deeper.
Yeah, over the weekend. So on Saturday was out with the family. My daughter had cheerleading and soccer and all the things. And they were going to go to the library. That we drove separately and they were going to go to the library to drop off some books. And so we decided, well, hey, well, let's meet up at this shop that's nearby that has crystals and some other spiritual items like that. And so I'll meet you there. When you guys are done the library, just meet me. So I went there and walked around, and I mean, it's not a very big store. Um, I mean, maybe 500 square feet. I mean, it's pretty small. Um, but walked around two or three times, and I'm sure I probably look like a crazy person, just kind of standing there and walking around in circles. But I was, again, waiting for them to show up. So, one of the time laps around I made, I got to a spot in front of this display case, and there's this big glass display case with different kinds of crystals and things like that inside of it. And then beside it, there's some shelves with some other things. And as I was standing there, all of a sudden I felt warm. And I kind of, kind of akin to, like, going through like a menopause heat flash. All of a sudden I was like, why am I warm all of a sudden? Like, what's going on here? Um, but it's not the first time I felt that. Um, I felt that before when I was at a different crystal place a couple of years ago, and walking through, and I felt that, and that was a signal to me that I had something that got my attention, that I need to look at that point. So I was like, all right, this is probably a sign that I needed that there's something here for me, because I kept walking around and nothing really was jumping out at me or grabbed my attention. So I walked over to the other side of the room, and it felt cool. I could feel the air conditioning and that kind of stuff going. So I'm like, well, that's interesting. It's cool and air conditioning feeling over here. And like 5 steps away over there, it was warm. Like, that's just not a coincidence. There's something there. So I walked back over to the spot, where I initially felt warm, and then started looking around. I'm like, all right, what is it here? What's going on in this spot? And I looked over the case, the glass case with all the some different crystals and stuff like that in it, and some stuff. And I'm like, nothing here is really jumping out at me. Like, there's some neat things in here, but like nothing is like, ooh, that's it. And I was kind of turning around and like, well, maybe I don't know, what am I supposed to be seeing? And then out of a corner of my eye, I noticed this very large stone, this very large tower, that was kind of tucked away on a shelf, hiding behind another large piece. And I hadn't seen it before, like the three or four times I'd gone around. And for whatever reason, this time it caught my eye. And I was like, that, what's that? So I went back and reached over and grabbed it and picked it up. And I mean, it's like 4 or 5 pounds. So this is a heavy piece here. And I looked at it and I kind of looked and I was like, this is it. I don't know what it is about this, but this is what I'm supposed to be here for. So I told Jason it came home with me. And the bonus was, I didn't realize the time, but actually, it was 50% off. So
Hey, there you go. Even better,
yeah,
right?
even better.
Well, and I think it's interesting because, we've talked a little bit about this, but we thought it might be a good episode to actually dig into a little bit more, but about paying attention to the signs that are around us, things that are going on, right? Because there's signs everywhere. There's symbolism in a lot of different things that we see that we don't actually realize. There's times like that where we get these kind of little hits or things that happen, and we may not understand why at the time, right? But we're receiving some sort of guidance. And so this first story that Brad tells is an exact experience of that, where I think even still, as we were talking before we started recording, you don't even know why you bought it yet, but
Right.
you
I've
knew
got
you
some
were supposed to buy
ideas.
it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got some ideas. I've sat a little bit with it and kind of visualized, and, some of it is something regarding absorption and something that I did that kept, the releasing for it. But but yeah.
But yeah, you don't know exactly, but at some point
Mhm.
you will know, right?
Right.
And I think it's a good kind of lesson of when the guidance comes, follow the guidance, and you'll know when you know why, right?
Mhm.
Because I think a lot of times that's a mistake that most of us will make is we want to have the answer up front. And the
Mhm.
universe is like, no, you just do the one little step, and I'll tell you later when when the time is
We'll
right.
get there.
We'll
Yeah,
get
we'll get
there.
there.
We'll get
Mhm.
there when the time is right. We're gonna get there, right?
Mhm.
But I think it's also a great example, and I'll share a story here in just a minute of Brad tuning in more to how he's feeling certain things, right? And so again, I know some of you listening, you may have experienced this, you may not have. I've experienced, I think, the same thing that you had, where it's like all of a sudden I get really hot,
Mhm.
like to the point to where I kind of break out a little bit in a sweat.
Right. It's
uh,
uncomfortable.
it's a little
Mhm.
bit uncomfortable, at first, and you're kind of like, what is going on? Am I going through menopause, or what's the deal, right?
Right. Menopause or something. Yeah.
Menopause, right? I mean, but again, it's I don't know what women feel in a hot flash, but at least from my friends and my wives, when they'd gone through it, it kind of sounded similar, right? And
Mhm.
so I get that every so often. That's not, maybe call it normal for me. I mean, I do feel that sometimes, but I usually get hits that feel a little bit different. It's almost like there's this tingly energy that radiates out from my center core, and I get kind of these goosebumps, if you will, and kind of like
Mhm.
almost a little shiver.
Mhm.
And that's a lot of the times how I feel, how I know that something is a confirmation, right? So for example, if I'm recapitulating or kind of meditating on something, and I'm like, well, is this the thing that I should do?
Mhm.
And as I'm quiet, if I get one of those hits, then it's like, okay, well, this is where I place my attention right now, and I'm getting this hit. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do, right? I'm getting confirmation uh from it, right? At that point. And so you did a good job, too, as far as you felt it, you kind of walked away a little bit, and it's like, hold it, now I feel different again,
Mhm.
right? So you go back, you probably felt warm again, and then you had what I don't know what I'm calling it, but it's like things look at you, okay? And it's I don't know how else to explain it other than the more that I've kind of tuned in and connected, the more it's like I'm seeing things looking at me, and they're kind of calling to me like, look at me, 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 right? And it might just be
Mhm.
a flash second,
Mhm.
but I'm kind of feeling that, like, pay attention to me, there's a reason, pay attention to me, right? And then again, we have
Mhm.
to figure out why, or we have to follow the guidance, and usually we don't know right away, right? It usually takes some time for us to know. um, but that's kind of how it is. So I can't remember if I've shared this story on here or not, because I can't remember where I shared what stories.
You have so many different things you
But
do. I mean,
I
it's
know.
it's
So
hard to
here
keep
we go.
track of them at all. And
Here we go. There's a reason why I'm sharing it again. So even if you've heard it for the fourth time, there's a reason, right? But
right, you'll hear it differently this time.
yeah, you will. And I mean, I remember, uh, when I was still living in California. I was actually here in Sedona with a group of people, and we were talking, and something kind of randomly came up. One of the people in the group was like, hey, see this aqua aura ring that I have, how much do you think I paid for it, where did I get it, blah 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 blah, kind of thing. Just kind of somewhat of a random, but related to what we were talking about anyway, right? So as this person was talking, because we were kind of talking about getting good deals on things too, right? Like you shouldn't have to pay full price, especially if the universe is helping you, usually like that. Hey, it's 50% off. The one
Percent
thing
off.
in the store that you want happens to be 50% off. Not a coincidence, right?
Mhm.
But anyway, and so it came up that this person had found this particular ring in what do you call them, a store, like in a state store, a
Antique store sort of thing.
antique mall, kind of a place in Oceanside, California. Right, very specific. It was this place in Oceanside, California. Where is it? Oh, I don't remember, but it's on the main road, right? Because Highway 1 kind of runs through Oceanside. So again, it was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but again, didn't necessarily take too much out of it. It was an interesting story for me. Um, and so I was back home, in the LA area. And what's interesting is Oceanside is kind of right between where I lived in the LA area and San Diego. It's kind of the first city in San Diego County. And so it was kind of a halfway mark. Usually, when I would drive to San Diego, I would stop in the town just before it, San Clemente, which is the last town in Orange County before you get into San Diego County. So that's usually where I would stop. If I had to go to the bathroom or have breakfast or whatever, I'd usually stop there. And so there was this one Saturday morning, when I woke up, and my wife at the time was, I think she was gone or something. So I was by myself in the house. And it was one of those days where you kind of wake up and it's like, oh, don't have anything on my calendar. What should I do today?
Mhm.
And I just kind of got the feeling like, go to Oceanside. And I'm like, why the fuck would I go to Oceanside?
Right.
Right?
What the heck's there? Yeah.
Well, get out. You need to have a drive, and there's something you need in Oceanside. So I'm like, okay, right, whatever, right?
It's
I
a
got
nice day.
time.
Yeah. Let's
It's a
do it.
nice day. I'd never actually been into Oceanside. I had, stopped at like a gas station right off the freeway, but I'd never actually gone into the town of Oceanside itself. And so I'm like, okay, right. So I get in my car, I drive down, and again, I'm sitting there like, I really don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I remembered the story about the antique mall in Oceanside.
Mhm.
So again, I'm like, I don't really know where it is, but maybe I can find this store that this person was talking about. So, I get off, I get down into the town, and I just start driving, and I'm just kind of scanning and looking at some of the different stores. So I kind of drive down, scanning at the stores, and I turn around and come back. And I'm like, well, this is kind of interesting. I stop at one of the gas stations that's right there, and kind of take a break because I've been driving for an hour and a half. Get out of the car, walk around a little bit, and I'm like, huh, well, I wonder where that might be. Guess what was right next to the gas station? An antique mall.
Peak ball.
And so I'm like, huh, well, this is funny. And there's a bunch of signs, going out of business or something, 25% off everything or something like that on the outside. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So I walk in and I did what you kind of did. I did kind of a loop in this area. It was a little bit bigger place, and we just kind of go in and see, is anything kind of jumping out at me in this store? And so I kind of make the rounds, and there were a couple of things that were kind of jumping out at me. And so I kind of went back around again. Is it still jumping out at me? And some things weren't the second time around, right? But there were some other things that kind of came about with it. And so I ended up finding a few things in there. There were probably 3 or 4 different things that I ended up buying. And some of them were kind of different, right? Like one was an old art book that, again, I hadn't necessarily thought about, but it was an artist that I appreciate their work. And so I ended up that was one of the things that I bought. Why? I don't know. Right. But it kind of felt like I was supposed to do that. So I walked away from there with a few things, and then I kind of come out and I'm like, oh, what should I do? And I was parked on the side of the street, and I kind of look around and scan, and what's across the street? Two more of these kind of shops. And I'm like, okay, go down to the crosswalk, go back over. And as I was walking, there was this one little tiny shop. Again, it was maybe, like you said, maybe 500 square feet. And the other one was a much bigger store with furniture and some other stuff in it too. And so as I'm walking through, I'm like, oh, I should go into this little store. And I go up, and of course, it's closed, right? And it has the "we'll be back" kind of thing or something like that. And I'm like, oh, well, isn't that interesting? That's the one I felt like I was supposed to go into, but I guess I can't. I'll go into the bigger store. So I go into the bigger store, and same thing. I kind of wander around the store, and not a lot was really jumping out at me. I was looking at all the cases, but one thing that did jump out to me, and I might have shared this one before, but these food dogs, these jade food dogs that are kind of lions from the
Mm-hmm.
Chinese thing, jumped out at me. And it's pretty rare to find jade like those. There's two of them that are kind of that size,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like $25 for both of them.
Wow.
I'm like, sold,
Done.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I got those, and I can't remember if there was something else that I had gotten in that store or not, but those were the things that kind of jumped out at me and felt like I was supposed to
Mm-hmm.
take home with me for some reason. I didn't know for sure why, but now those food dogs are actually on my desk protecting me, because they're protectors, right? And it's also an opportunity for me to have jade in my workspace, right? So I didn't know at the time. I looked at it, I'm like, hey, these are kind of cool looking. It's a great price. How am I going to use it? Didn't know at the time until I got back home, and I'm like, oh, these need to go on either side of my desk, right? So I get done there, and I come out, and guess what? That other shop is now open. And I was looking for a particular gem. And so this place had more jewelry in it. So when I went in, the lady who was working there is like, what are you looking for? Well, I'm looking for this kind of gem. Needs to be about this size, right? And do you have anything like that? Well, no, we have this, but we don't really have anything that matches that. Okay, great. Again, why am I here? I don't know yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of just wander around. It was one of those places that had a lot of little curio cabinets that was just full of lots of little things to look at, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm kind of wandering around, looking at everything, and I see this turquoise ring, and it's one that I often wear on this finger. I didn't put it on this morning for some reason. Should have, because I didn't know we were going to talk about it. But I saw this turquoise ring, and it was an old Navajo ring with coral and turquoise on it. And I'd been wanting to also get some jewelry that was turquoise and silver for some things that I was doing. And so I'm like, that's a really interesting piece. I really like that. And I'm like, can I see that piece? And so she pulls it out and she hands it to me, and I get kind of like a little tingly feel, but it's kind of faint, right? And I put it on my finger, and guess what? It exactly fits my forefinger. And so I'm looking in the case, and she's like, oh, we just got that in this week. And there's another very interesting piece that we just got in at the same time. And it was this ring, this turquoise and silver ring. And so I'm like, oh, well, can I see that one? And I pulled it out, and she handed it to me, and it was like lightning zap. I put it on my finger, and I could actually feel my finger tingling, right? So it's like, okay, this is a little different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, she's like, well, which one do you like? I'm like, well, what kind of deal would you give me for both? And so we worked out a price, and I walked away with both of those pieces, right? So was it a coincidence that I went to Oceanside on that day? No, right? Was it a coincidence that she happened to get, and this other one, here you go.
Oh, that's right.
Hey
Yeah.
everybody,
It's you
right?
too.
It's a middle
Right.
finger ring, right? I love you. That's what that means, right?
Yep.
But
Mhm.
but yeah, it was both pieces, probably. I don't know if they came from the same person, probably. But they're both older pieces. I know the one looks like a Navajo one. This one I don't know, but like I said, when I put it on, I could just feel a difference with it. And again, how am I going to use it? I don't know, but I'm supposed to wear this one on my middle finger on this hand, right? That's just what I felt like I'm supposed to do. The other one, when I wear it, it's on my index finger, and it also fits on my thumb, right? And so sometimes, again, when I feel like I need it, I get the sense I need to wear this one on my middle finger almost all the time. The
Mm.
other one, it's like when you feel like it, right?
Yeah.
And again, at the time, I didn't know exactly why I needed it. I'm starting to understand more why I needed it, but that's been 6 months ago, at least, probably, right? But over that time, I've learned more and more about how I'm using these rings and what they're doing for me. And but I would have never known if I would have sat there in the shop and it's like, oh, these are kind of cool, but I have no idea how I would use them. So forget it. I'm not going to take them home. Right. That wouldn't have been in my highest and best interest. But me paying attention to the signs, right? Feeling what I was feeling and allowing myself to feel what I was feeling. I walked away with both of those pieces. And now, over the last 6 months, I'm learning more about why, right? And so we have to, my mentor is always saying, I just follow the guidance, and I know when I know. I follow the
Mhm.
guidance, and I know when I know. Because most of the time when the signs and the guidance come, we have no fucking clue what it means.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we don't have to. We just have to follow. And when you follow, then you will find out.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I get this stone, I actually, told my wife, I came over to her and was like, I found something that I don't really want to have to buy, but and she's like, "Oh, is it this one over here piece that you've seen in the past?" I was like, "No, no, it's this other one." And I showed it to her. And he's like, "Is it something that you kind of feel drawn to?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, then you need to buy it."
Yeah, it's nice that she
Yeah.
supports you in that and
Hmm.
realizes or understands, right? Because other people might have been like, oh, you don't need that. That's one more thing in our house, and we already have enough stuff, and you
Don't
don't need
spend the
that.
money and
And
all
don't
that
spend the
stuff. And
money on it. Yeah.
hmm
But again, it's like when you need it, you just do it. And I've been that way with several different purchases that I've made the last couple of years. It's like some of them are kind of like, geez, I really don't have the money right now for that, but I'm supposed to have it. Okay. I guess I'm gonna figure it out. Right. And I
hmm
always do. I always figure it out. It always kind of works out the way it's exactly the way it's supposed to.
hmm Yeah. Yeah, I've done it with candles in the past where something said I need to go in the store and get candles. I know we've talked about that in the past on episodes. And again, didn't know at the time when I got them what I needed them for. Like, why am I getting candles? And sometimes particular colors, why am I getting this particular color? But that's what I was drawn to. And just something said, in my head, hey, you need this candle in this color. And it wasn't until afterwards that something kind of struck me and it was like, there it is.
Yep.
That's what it's for.
Well, and I think maybe too, right, to kind of talk about this with people, because this is something that I've been learning because I'd heard people that I know talk about like going into a crystal shop and just kind of knowing what you're supposed to come home with. And I'm over here thinking, well, I don't know that I really that really happens to me, right? Or I have this assumption in my head that I'm going to walk in and the heavens are going to part and I'm going to hear
A
this
spotlight's going to
loud
shine on some
spotlight's
piece
going to
and that's it.
shine on it. And this loud voice
Mhm.
says, Jason, you need to buy this
Right.
particular thing, right? Fill in the blank. But that's not the way it works, right? And so, but the more I've been paying attention and tuning in, the more I'm starting to see it. And I kind of made reference to like things looking at me.
Mhm.
You know, like it's kind of the weirdest thing, like something you would walk by and just kind of tune out or not even really think about, but I'm getting these things out of the corner of my eye, or as I'm scanning the room, it's not like there's a spotlight on it, but there kind of is. And it's not like there's eyes that are looking at me, but it kind of is. And it's not like I hear this audible voice, but it kind of is. And I don't know if that makes sense to anybody. So I haven't said it like that out loud to anybody. So Brad,
And so now you're like, oh, that's
does that even make any sense what I just said?
I mean, I think the idea that, and again, I kind of felt this when I over this weekend is like I kind of caught this stone at the corner of my eye. It was hiding behind this other big piece. It was kind of pushed back against the wall, and like I went through it 3 or 4 times, went past it, and nothing. And just one time, and this last time, something again, like you said, out of the corner of my eye, just kind of, and it wasn't that there was a physical light shining on it necessarily that was spotlighting it, but there was something that was pulling my attention to it as if it was like lit up that way. And
Mm-hmm.
like all of a sudden I was like, what's that thing over there? Like my eye was just kind of drawn to it as if it had been lit up, even though it wasn't literally lit up. And I mean, I think that's probably what you're trying
Yeah.
to say, is that it's not like a literal light or maybe a literal voice that's actually someone saying it to you, but it's that sensation that you're being drawn based to something.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, I mean, that's one of the things, as we do this podcast or we talk about spiritual things in general, I think sometimes there's no words in our language to really describe what we're experiencing. So sometimes it's hard to put what we're feeling or sensing into words to describe it. And so that's why it's like a light shining on it, but it's not a light shining on it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's something that's drawing my attention to it
Mm-hmm.
as if there is a spotlight on it, but I don't see with my 3D eyes an actual light on that, but
Right.
it's still drawing me in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I'm not hearing an audible voice in my ears, but it's like telepathically I'm kind of hearing something, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
again in the ways that we would think about it. Like when you're hearing me talk right now, you're hearing word after word after word, and you're stringing it together over a few seconds to know what I'm saying. Because a lot of times when these things happen, it's almost like it's instantaneous, right? And I've
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of experiences like this where it's it's almost instantaneous, like within a second I just kind of have this knowing, like this vision, this whatever has kind of come in and just been like, right, all in this 1 second. And I'm like, how do you describe all of what I just experienced in less than a
Yeah.
second in words?
And you can't. Yeah,
You
I mean,
can't.
because these are not 3D things, and the 3D stuff, that's the logical part of your brain talking, and this other stuff is kind of subconscious stuff. It's beyond the level of the logical brain, and your words come from the logical part of your brain. Like the subconscious whatever doesn't use words, it uses images and emotions. And I think that's part of the issue, is that the part that's sensing this stuff is not the part that's our language center.
Yeah.
And so the two don't go together that way. So you can't mash the two up because it's coming from different parts of the brain.
Yeah.
So
And those of you that have experienced these things, you know what we're talking about. And those of you that haven't maybe experienced it yet, I'm I'm just trying to explain it in a way that makes more sense to me, that I wish somebody would have explained it to me that way, because like I said, I was under the impression that the heavens parted and there was audible, words and
angelic
things like
choirs singing and
angelic,
stuff when it's
oh,
mm-hmm,
please come pick me. I am so wonderful and I want to go home with you. Right.
mm-hmm,
But I don't think the people who were explaining to me what happened to them, I don't think that those audible things were actually happening to them. But again, they were just doing the best
mm-hmm,
they could to describe what they were experiencing in the
right.
best that they could with the language that they actually had.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
So I think we've given some good information. I think one thing that I was thinking of to maybe kind of wrap up a little bit on is, for people that are wanting to pay attention more to the signs and want to connect more in and want to receive more of these intuitive hits or whatever you want to end up calling it. How do they do it?
Mm-hmm, right. Yeah.
How do they do it?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think probably two things come to mind. First of all, is you have to be receptive to it. Like you have to be willing to listen. You have to be willing to, when something comes like that, to follow it. Because I think if you just shrug it off and you don't listen to it, eventually that's going to stop. It's gonna be like, well, you're not paying attention anyway, so f you, right? Like screw you. We're not going to keep on sending you these messages if you're just going to keep ignoring us. So you have to be willing to follow when you get this nudge, when something comes to you. Okay, what's it trying to say? And kind of look for those things. And the other one is you got to get out of your head. You got to kind of quiet your mind. And I know we've talked about that in the past, about the importance of being quiet. And I mean, I by no means is my mind, silent, like there's always something going on in there. But I feel like I've been able to start, especially when I'm trying to focus on something like that, where I'm like, I'm in this crystal shop. What's going on in here? I can kind of lower the sound a little bit and let some of the other stuff in. Because if you're always thinking about what's going on and like, what am I going to do for dinner tonight? And I hope the dog didn't pee on the floor when I get home. And that, the things I've got on my job, on my plate, or this client matter and all that kind of stuff. When you're thinking of all the other things, you're not really able to focus on what may be happening around you. And
Yeah.
so you kind of have to get rid of all that stuff or put it aside so that you can actually hear what these messages that trying to send to you.
Yeah, because most of those things that you're talking about that end up crowding into our brain that we have to quiet are things in the past or things in the
Mm-hmm.
future.
Yep.
Right. And so, again, the more that we can just quiet and be focused on and maybe place an intention on finding out why. Right. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when you walk, if you feel like, you're supposed to go to that shop, right? So you go to the shop and then you walk into the shop and you're like, okay, my intention is to find out the reason why I'm here, right? And so if you place that intention and then you're placing your attention in the present moment on the things that are here,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not in anger or other things, but you're feeling curious, you're feeling grateful, you're feeling love, you're feeling some of these other emotions, so your frequency is more aligned, then those things are going to come through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great way of kind of describing it. And I think too, one other thing that I might add to it is we all kind of get these hits a little bit different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's up to each and every person to kind of find out how the universe talks to you, right? Like I said, I get this, and again, it's hard to describe this exactly. It's kind of like goosebumps. It's kind of like this not prickly, but kind of like tingly, tickly kind of feeling almost that comes from my center core and kind of goes out my body, right? That I get most of the time. But that's not the only way that I receive these things too, right? But I've learned over my life that when I feel that feeling, I need to pay attention, because it's either a confirmation of something that I just said or confirmation of something I just thought. It's confirmation of a decision that I am trying to make, whatever it is. But I know when I feel that feeling, pay attention, because it's a message, it's a sign from the universe, right? But I've also had the hot flashes, like you talked about. I had this one experience that I was just telling my sister about last night, where I kind of got that normal, almost, feeling that I'm talking about. I got that, and then it was almost like immediately upon that, I felt like this heat, but not like a hot flash heat, but like a heat lamp was on me, and I could feel the heat go from my head down to my feet. Right. And so again, it was a different feeling. I haven't felt that a lot of times, but that was a major decision in my life that I was trying to make. So I got hit twice, right?
Make
In
sure you pay
this
attention to it.
in the same 1 or 2 seconds. And obviously I paid attention to it, because it's like, whoa, not only is this the same as what I normally feel, but there was something different going on here as well. So
Mm-hmm.
double pay attention
That's
at
right.
that point.
We mean business.
Yeah. And so, again, I don't know, Brad,
Yeah.
do you feel things a different way? I mean, maybe if you just kind of share how you feel it, because as people are trying to figure it out, and like I said, there's no right way, there's no wrong way. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't feel the way I do, if you don't feel the way Brad does, that's fine. Just, pay attention and learn how you actually feel it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I talked about, again, kind of the hot flash something, and it's happened twice now in situations where I was actually in a crystal shop, with different spiritual items and things like that. And it kind of, to me, signified, hey, there's something here that you need to be getting. Sometimes you talked about the idea of the chills. I'll get like a chill, and it won't be necessarily radiating, but I'll just kind of like just a little chill, like a goosebumps. And as a confirmation signal for me, I'll hear something and I was like, ooh, that's something I need to, follow up on or pay attention to. If I hear something, maybe, in a podcast, like, one of the list of, listening, coming with some topics for these sessions. And one of the things, I was listening to a podcast over the weekend on Sunday, and something came up in one of those podcast episodes, and I got that kind of a chill feeling, like, ooh, that's something there that you may want to focus on or look into a little bit more. So I'll get that sometimes. And then sometimes I just get, and for lack of better way to explain, like you said, because a lot of times the language is hard to explain it, but just kind of, something just pops into my head and I just kind of know. Like I just was driving, and I just, saw a store that sells candles, and I was just, dollar store, and I was like, I've got to go in there and get candles. Like that it just came to me. It was all of a sudden, it was just there. And it wasn't, it's different than a feeling of, sometimes you just have a random thoughts pop in your head and you're like, oh, look at that, a pretty tree over there, or, oh, a puppy, that, it's totally different than those kind of situations where it's more calm. There's not emotion attached to it. What happens, it's just kind of you need to do it, kind of a matter of fact, no debate about it sort of a deal. And so sometimes I'll have that happen to me with information or things I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and I get those same things. I mean, and what I was talking about before, I think I mentioned earlier about like all the stuff that happened in like less than a second. It was, one particular time that I really remembered was, and it was kind of a random thing. I wasn't thinking about this, or
Right.
I don't remember asking myself a question necessarily about it, but all of a sudden, within like less than a second, there were three different stories that I had heard that came back into my awareness, and kind of told me to do something. But it wasn't, again, I can't remember if I actually had any of those feelings, but it was kind of like what you're describing. It was just this knowing, and I knew what I needed to do. Right. And it wasn't, it's like, oh, well, that's interesting. I guess it's time to do that. I better go do that. Sort of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, sometimes too, I'll also get this just really calm, peaceful, kind of warm feeling around my heart. Sometimes I'll get that as a feeling as well. And I'm sure there might be others, but at least we're, everybody listening, we're trying to give you some
Mm-hmm.
examples of what we've gone through or what we experience. You might experience some of the same things, right? You may not, but it's just up to you now to go do the work
Mm-hmm.
and to start listening to your body, seeing where you're feeling certain things. Are you seeing patterns, and how you're receiving these things? And then like Brad said, you gotta, once you kind of are starting to understand that, now you've got to start acting on it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when those things come in, act on it, see how you feel, see what works out. Next time you have that same feeling, act on it, see how it works, right? Because it's spiritual exercise and practicing, and the
Mm-hmm.
more you do it, the easier it will get, and the more often it will actually occur.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of one thing like a muscle almost that you got to work it out.
mhm,
And the more you work it out, the stronger the muscle gets, the more you can do with it. And
mhm, exactly. So everybody pay attention to the signs, pay attention to the guidance that you're being given. If you don't feel like you're receiving it, it's probably not that you're not receiving it, it's just that you're not tuned and listening yet. So we gave you some ways that you can start working on that this week. So that would be my hope, is that everybody goes out and actually gets a step or two closer,
yeah,
on wherever you happen to be at on the path.
yeah. And if you have experienced some of these signs, or if you're like, this happened to me and I'm not really sure if this was a sign or not, make a comment on our on the podcast. Let us know those things, and happy to address them and talk about them and stuff, and be able to kind of tailor what we talk about to things that are going to specifically help you who are listening.
Yep.
Because I mean, I love sitting here and talking with Jason, on these podcast episodes. But I know there's other people listening too, and there's things that you guys might find valuable. And if this is something that kind of resonates with you, or that you have interest in, let us know, and we'll talk more about it. And maybe you can use some of your examples and things like that to things help you out. So
Exactly. Yeah, because like I said, we enjoy talking to each other. We hope that you find value in this. But yeah, if you've got questions or comments, hit us up. Social
yeah.
media, reach out to us. However, because we want to hear what you're going through too, and if there's ways that we can improve this or talk about specific topics or answer specific questions that people have, hey, that's what we're here for too. So
Mhm.
do that. Start tuning in more, have more attention on the signs that are around you, and we'll see you next time.
See you then.